This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Nermeen Sheikh. Welcome to our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. We begin today's show looking at the case of computer activist Jeremy Hammond, who made headlines by hacking into the private U.S.-based intelligence firm Stratfor. Documents obtained from Stratfor were later published by the whistleblowing website WikiLeaks, shedding light on how the private intelligence firm monitors activists and spies for corporate clients. On Tuesday, Hammond admitted to being a member of the group Anonymous and pled guilty to hacking Stratfor as well as a number of other institutions, including the FBI. In a statement, Hammond said, quote, "I did this because I believe people have a right to know what governments and corporations are doing behind closed doors. I did what I believe is right." Hammond is facing a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison. He's already spent 15 months incarcerated, including weeks in solitary confinement. Michael Ratner, President Emeritus of the Center for Constitutional Rights, spoke outside the courthouse Tuesday after Hammond pled guilty.
Jeremy Hammond pleaded guilty to one count of conspiracy of hacking into a protected computer. That count finishes the case in terms of any other charges. It carries up to a maximum of 10 years in prison. He doesn't have to get that, and in fact the demand is that he get time served. This is part of the sledgehammer of what the government is doing to people who expose corporate secrets, government secrets, and really the secrets of an empire. And the people who should have been on that trial are the very people who Jeremy admitted to hacking into, which is the Stratfor people who've engaged in corporate spying along with government cooperation, the public safety people in Arizona, the FBI, etc.
Sarah Kunstler, one of Jeremy Hammond's attorneys, also spoke outside the courthouse.
The United States government has discretion over its cases, over who it chooses to prosecute and why. And choosing to prosecute Jeremy Hammond for exposing corporate secrets and government spying is nothing if not a political decision.
To talk more about the Jeremy Hammond case, we are joined by Julian Assange, the founder of the whistleblowing website WikiLeaks. In February 2012, WikiLeaks began publishing hundreds of thousands of emails obtained by Stratfor. Julian Assange joins us via Democracy Now! Video stream from the Ecuadorian embassy in London. He took refuge in the embassy last June to avoid extradition to Sweden, where he's wanted for questioning around sex assault allegations. On Tuesday, Ecuador's foreign minister accused the British government of trampling on Assange's rights by refusing to allow him to travel to Ecuador, which granted him political asylum almost a year ago. We're going to talk about Jeremy Hammond, about Bradley Manning, and about Julian Assange's own case for this hour. Julian Assange, welcome back to Democracy Now! Can you start off by responding to Jeremy Hammond pleading guilty and what his case means to you?
Let's look at what we know and what the prosecution agrees with about Jeremy Hammond. He's a long-term political activist. He's been involved in political activism throughout his political life. The allegation against him is that through his political activism, he became a journalistic source to WikiLeaks and to hundreds of other media organizations in the United States and around the world. The crackdown against Jeremy Hammond is part of, yes, on the one hand, the crackdown on effective political activists, but it's also part of the crackdown on alleged journalistic sources.
I want to turn to Michael Ratner, President Emeritus of the Center for Constitutional Rights. Also, your attorney, Julian Assange, for Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. He spoke about the emails from the private intelligence firm Stratfor that were allegedly published by WikiLeaks.
Allegedly, the Julian Assange and WikiLeaks are publishing the material of the Stratfor emails. And so the comparison is that they're going after now a whistleblower and a source, and a person who has been a source to journalists. If you look at what happened with the Stratfor emails, 31 major media around the world in 17 countries published those. He's a whistleblower, he's a source. He ought to be protected like whistleblowers and sources ought to be protected. My client, WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, ought to be protected as publishers. He shouldn't have to wind up in the Ecuadorian embassy.
Julian Assange, your response.
Thank you, Amy. This is part of the wider crackdown against journalistic sources, which has been in the news recently as a result of the FBI and the DOJ taking records from the Associated Press and for Fox News journalist James Rosen. That is something that has really risen up under the Obama administration. Obama has, in relation to the Espionage Act, applied it to more people, more journalistic sources and journalists than all previous administrations combined, going back to the origin of that act in 1917. In fact, Obama on his campaign website brags that it's twice as many applications as has been previously done. And that's part of a new centralization of power in the United States. Back in Russia, if we look in the 1990s and Putin's taming of the oligarchs, we had independent points of power in Russia, the 7 oligarchs, the KGB, the Ministry of Defense, and eventually they were all pooled in under one central pyramidical structure. And the same thing has been evolving in the United States over the last 10 years. That's why, for example, we see that the rather unremarked but extremely significant that the State Department budget in its entirety has been moved in under the national security budget. The USAID budget similarly has been moved in under the national security budget. That the head of the CIA is rotated with the head of the military. That there's inter-exchanges at all points. That private military contractors like Stratfor form a type of oil between these different groups, interconnecting them in terms of personnel, information flows, and contracts. A giant centralization of power. The previous rivalrous group to this was perhaps US finance companies and banks. Post-2008, it's clear who is winning, and in order to get anything of significance done in the United States, just like in Russia, you need a sponsor within that patronage network. And as a result of its increasing strength and increasing power, it is able to command an increasing share of the US tax burden, pulling it to itself. The State Department, left on its own, left out there in isolation, was having its budget decline at about 3 to 4% per year in real terms, while the military was having the intelligence complex was having a similar increase in real terms per year. So that's presumably why it decided to jettison some of its independence as an institution and move in under this protective financial umbrella. That shows you the increasing political strength. The US tax burden is picketed over like vultures at a corpse, and the biggest vulture can steal more of the blood of US taxpayers. And the biggest vulture at the moment is the military-industrial complex, and it's getting bigger. It's able to throw more political weight around and able to transfer more finances to itself, which allows it to grow even fatter. Other competing institutions like the Department of Health or pension programs and so on, they also try and compete politically. But in reality, in fact, they are not competing as well as they could in the past, so this machine is getting bigger. And as it gets bigger and bigger, it starts to advance its front to gain more and more power for itself. And the crackdown in relation to the Espionage Act is an example of that. The going after political activists like Jeremy Hammond and trying to put them in prison for 10 years, forcing them to take a plea by ladling them up with a potential 30-year prison sentence under exactly the same piece of legislation that Aaron Schwartz found himself faced with, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, same piece of legislation that's used in partly used in the Bradley Manning proceedings, same piece of legislation that's used in the WikiLeaks grand jury. We know that from subpoenas. So this is part of an advancing front, taking grounds, making new claims that those people that effectively criticize this new centralized power group in the United States should not be able to do so.
Julian Assange, in addition to facing a maximum of 10 years in prison, Jeremy Hammond may also be required to pay up to $2.5 million in restitution costs. So you've talked a little bit about how this is part of a widening range of crackdowns on whistleblowers. What do you think this kind of precedent, his plea, sets, and what kind of example do you think it gives for people who are whistleblowers in the future?
Yeah, look, the Obama administration is becoming a sausage factory for making political prisoners. And now we have Jeremy Hammond, John Kirikou, Bradley Manning, and it is after a number of others as well. The example that it is trying to set, of course, is don't criticize this new power bloc at all. We don't care what means that you do it by. There will be a way found to criminalize it. And people like Hammond and Manning, John Kirikou, they are used as examples. Like, do something we don't like and we're going to go after you in order to decrease criticism and embarrassment on behalf of this new dominant political institution in the United States.
Do you see Jeremy Hammond as a whistleblower, and if so, why?
Well, Jeremy Hammond is not a whistleblower. He is a political activist. But the mechanism of his political activism overlaps the mechanism of many different whistleblowers. For example, the alleged whistleblowing activities of Bradley Manning, very similar sort of alleged activity. They're going after him because they don't like the results. They're going after WikiLeaks because they don't like the results. They're going after Bradley Manning because they don't like the results. And to try and keep an appearance of authority, the Pentagon, allied institutions like Stratfor can't keep up our perception of authority if bright young men, determined, courageous and moral, like Jeremy Hammond, are seen to have struck a blow against them and exposed their corrupt activities.
We're going to break, then come back to this discussion. We're speaking with WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. He has been granted political asylum by Ecuador, is in the Ecuadorian embassy right now in London. If he dares to step foot outside, the British government says they will arrest him and extradite him to Sweden. We'll talk about his case as well as Bradley Manning's case, who is about to go to trial in a moment.